Oh, this is going to be the coolest basketball game ever.
Actually, it says here we're going to see hockey.
No!
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Puck short. Hello everyone and welcome to this week's episode of the One Puck Short podcast. Jeff Marek joins me later in the show. There's a couple of news and noteworthy items I wanted to touch on before we get to that. Mike Richards' contract, which was infamously terminated this summer by the Los Angeles Kings. An agreement has been reached between the Kings, Richards and the NHLPA. It brings to the end a rather sorry saga, I think it's fair to say. Not been a great summer for the NHL with various unsavoury news stories. Obviously, we touched on Patrick Kane and Zach Kassian last week. Ryan O'Reilly, who's also in trouble with the local police. Richards was arrested for carrying a controlled substance while trying to cross the Canadian border. And it sort of rolled on since then. The Kings cancelled remaining 5 years and $22 million, it must be added, of his deal on June 29th. Now, Richards signed a 12-year, $69 million deal with the Flyers in 2007 while he was still Philadelphia captain. There were the issues with the whole party lifestyle, should we call it, of some Flyers players during his tenure as captain. There was the Dry Island saga, if people remember that, where players were committing to not drinking and so forth. It was all slightly concerning for fans, media, management alike. Richards was subsequently traded to the Kings, where he won 2 Stanley Cups. And in that first Cup victory, he was an important part of that team, but he was clearly a player of diminishing returns. There was talk about his health post-cancellation, or should I say post this agreement on the cancellation being announced. There was more came out about issues with concussion and concerns with things off the ice for Richards, but it's also been treated with some scorn, understandably. Slava Voinov was eventually deported. He went back to Russia, but the way the Kings treated Voinov compared to Richards has a lot of people frowning, a lot of people angry. It's not frowning, I'm underselling it really. It's anger, and understandably so. They cancelled Richards' contract, but Voinov, who's since been convicted of domestic abuse, was kept on the payroll effectively. He was kept on the books. The NHL suspended him. The Kings allowed him to train with the team, and a lot of very ill-judged moves surrounding that. Eventually, he, as we said, went back to Russia, and a lot of people felt that the way the two situations have been handled were more reflective of the player's on-ice ability than what was morally right. And Richards' declining form, declining numbers, declining presence as a top two-way centre, which is what he used to be, seemed to have led the Kings to this decision, while Voinov was still, ability-wise, on the ice, purely speaking on the ice, a top 4D man for that team. So, again, a lot of scorn there, understandably so. Whether Richards comes back from this, it's hard to say. He's back in court in December, as we mentioned. Does a team take a shot on it? You know, now we know there were health issues, especially ones with concussion. The legal proceedings, whether they end in December, we don't know. Does a team give him a 1-year deal on a low salary, similar to what Montreal have done with Alex Semin? When I say similar, I mean 1 year, $1 million, not similar situations personally. Maybe a team gives him a shot. Someone like Arizona, who could do with a little help while the kids develop and learn there. Is he even capable of playing at that level again, at the NHL level? We just don't know. And it's a sad end for a guy who was a quality player at one point, and he's only 30 years old. The Kings now carry a $1.3 million recapture penalty as part of this until, some people have said it is until 2031, which is absolutely crazy. And that's more than Jeff Schultz earns. It's more than Jonas Enroth, the backup netminder, earns. It's nearly as much as Christian Ehrhoff earns. Christian Ehrhoff earns $1.5 million with the Kings this year. That's mad. It's absolutely mad. Tanner Pearson only just earns more than that. Jordan Nolan earns less as well. It's a crazy situation that LA now have to, I say, live with, for lack of a better term. And I know Dean Lombardi's conduct and judgment has been called into question. Greg Wyshynski of Puck Daddy wrote quite a good blog piece on whether you can really believe in Dean Lombardi and trust Dean Lombardi anymore. That's a valid question. It really is a valid question. Moving back to on-ice news, interesting things going on in Calgary for me. I wrote about this on the blog earlier on. You can read it at onepuckshort.wordpress.com. The Flames are carrying 3 really NHL quality netminders. Jonas Hiller, Kari Ramo, and Johnny Otio. And they need to make a decision sooner rather than later about where they're going to go. And for me, there's only one option here. They need to move Kari Ramo. There's no other way about it. Some people suggest moving Hiller, which is insane in my opinion, because he's their best goalie. Otio is a top prospect. They can't waive him. That's the difference between Otio and Malcolm Subban in Boston. They can't waive Otio, so the Flames aren't going to give him up for nothing. And again, you can't trade Hiller. He's the best goalie. He's the best of the three. I don't care how hard they try and hammer Ramo into that starting spot, that square peg into that round hole. He's not as good as Jonas Hiller. The sticking point for Ramo is, bear in mind the Flames re-signed him to a one-year deal this summer. He earns $3.8 million. Not many teams are going to take him at that rate, even if he is an unrestricted free agent next year. One thing that might help Calgary slightly, however, in this situation is that Robin Lehner is out for 6 to 10 weeks with a high ankle sprain. So maybe there's some interest from the Sabres side of things. They have $9.8 million in cap space. Chad Johnson and Nathan Lewin get the nod right now, but you've got to believe the Sabres are going to want to be more competitive, and I think they need more than Johnson and Lewin to stay competitive. But equally, if Johnson does okay, a couple of months, Lehner's back. I think even with Carey Price or Henrik Lundqvist in there, Buffalo probably isn't a playoff team this year. I think they'd be happy to finish in the top 10 in the East. That'd be a fantastic turnaround for them. I think they'll move forward, but again, not a playoff team for me. So it depends how competitive we're talking when I say they want to be more competitive, which I think they do after last year's tanking effort. So we'll see, there's not many places Calgary could move Ramo. And quite frankly, if Buffalo offers them a low pick or a depth player, maybe they should take it. Or even future consideration, this situation's going to cause a problem at some point for Calgary. They can't lose Otio and they can't give up Hiller. He's the best goalie. This is a team on the up, feeling good about themselves. Playoff team last year. They're going to want to be in the mix again this year come spring. You can't lose your best goalie. That compromises the whole thing. Everything they built on last year, that half tears it down, trading away a legitimate NHL starter. Because Ramo's not and Otio's not ready to take that load yet. I think that's the two things I wanted to cover prior to jumping in with Mr. Marek. So I'll have a quick ad break and then we'll be on with Jeff Marek. One Puck Short is brought to you in association with Eastside Hockey Manager, an in-depth ice hockey management simulation brought to you by Sports Interactive and Sega, developers of the world-famous Football Manager series, coming soon for PC via Steam. Joining me now on the One Puck Short podcast, all the way from Sportsnet in Canada, Mr. Jeff Marek. Hi, Jeff. How are you?
Rob, how are you today, bud? Nice to hear your voice again.
Yeah, great to catch up again. Couldn't make the stars align last season, but great to get you on early this year.
Absolutely.
So, first weekend of the new NHL season out of the way. Granted, a little bit longer than a weekend, but we'll call it a long weekend. Kind of hard to get a real handle on where teams are heading based on a couple of games. But were there any teams that particularly impressed you or didn't impress you during the opening weekend of the 2015-16 season?
New York Rangers, they've stood out.
Yep.
There was some question marks whether they would have lost too much up front with the loss of Carl Hagman, but early indications are no. They're still arguably the fastest team in the NHL. They're still quite content to play the same style of play, the same system, which is essentially creating foot races all over the ice. Pucks are always in front of people. Forced other teams' defensemen to try to outrace a New York forward for the puck. Generally, the Rangers win those battles. That's their style, so that continues this year. 3-0 so far to kick off the campaign, and they're looking great. Montreal is an interesting story as well. Their power play is awful, but the line of Eller, Galchenyuk, and Alexander Semin seem to be paying some dividends. Max Pacioretty is as advertised as is Carey Price, and that blue line power play still a question mark there. San Jose's been a nifty little story. 2-0. Yeah, which is, it's funny, Rob. They're 2-0, and I was on radio this morning in Toronto. I was asked about, so early surprises this year in the season, just like the conversation we're having. And I said, well, you have to look at the San Jose Sharks and what they've been able to do and who they've beaten. And then I stopped myself and I said, well, don't we say this every October about the San Jose Sharks? Like, what am I doing here? I say this every October. Oh, San Jose looks good early, because San Jose always looks good early. Catch me in a month or two, and then we'll get a better evaluation of where the San Jose Sharks are at. The Western Conference, very much once again looks like a jump ball with Chicago having to shed some skin. They've come back down to the pack a little bit more as well. You wonder if Winnipeg is for real. Can Minnesota, improve on last year as well? I'll tell you one of the big surprises the wrong way for me so far, and it's only a 2-game audit, but man, do the Los Angeles Kings look like a slow-footed team. Now, LA's never been they've never been the fleetest of foot in the NHL. Their strength has always been puck possession, moving the puck quickly. The puck moves quicker than the feet, and big bodies up front. But man, I think that the LA Kings so far, Rob, are rivaled only by the Boston Bruins in terms of just how slow the team speed is. It's challenging to watch the LA Kings so far this season.
Yeah, the Kings were one of the teams I noted losing 5-1 to San Jose on opening night and 4-1 to Arizona, who, to be fair, have made a pretty strong start in their 2 opening games with Mike Smith recapturing his form. And you mentioned the Sharks. I mean, Martin Jones has been brilliant. A shutout against the Ducks. He was in there for the game against the Kings.
Yep.
I have to admit, I struggled to see where San Jose were going as a team because they brought in Joel Ward and Paul Martin, so they got older. But then they got younger in net, and they've got Thomas Hertel, Mueller, and it's kind of where this team was heading. But as you say, yet again, they've made a great start. It's whether they can maintain it and whether Jones and Stalick are the real deal between the pipes.
We'll see. I mean, I think it's better than Anthony Niemi. I've never been a big fan of his. You go back 2 seasons ago to that playoff series against the LA Kings. They're up 3-0 against Los Angeles, and all they needed, Rob, was a save. They needed Niemi to make a save, and they just didn't get it. Now, I'm with you on Martin Jones. I don't know whether he's the real deal. We've only seen him in the NHL in a supporting role. We haven't seen him as a lead actor, so we don't know, whether he can lug the mail for an entire full season as a legitimate number one. Having said that, early indications are he's an upgrade from Niemi. It is an interesting squad because they brought in Paul Martin, and so far he's settled in really nicely with Brent Burns. That allows Mark-Edouard Vlasic to play with Justin Braun. There have been a couple of surprises up front. I think Joel Ward has been, continues to be a nice surprise. He went to Washington from Nashville. There were some early struggles, but by the end he seemed to be a really nice piece on that right side. Ditto now playing with Logan Couture and Patrick Marleau. But to me, when you look at the San Jose Sharks, I mean, you know what you're getting out of Joe Thornton. You know what you're getting out of Joe Pavelski. You don't know what we're getting out of Jonas Donskoy, who's been a revelation for this team. He's up on left wing on the first line. To me, one of the questions is, how good can that third line be? Matt Nieto, one of the fastest players in the NHL. Tomas Hertl, who before the knee injury, people are saying is the next great Czech breakout player in the NHL. And the very versatile, I guess you call him a veteran at 27, Tommy Wingle. You wonder if that could somehow morph into one of the best third lines in the NHL. And if that happens, and the potential is there, then I think we're ready to say the San Jose Sharks are a legitimate threat once again in the Western Conference, because then you have some really good pieces on that fourth line as well, like some solid, like Chris Cherney is a solid NHL hockey player. Barclay Goodrow, is a really solid NHL hockey player. So, Ben Smith, these types of players, like you have solid players on that fourth line. So it could be, and I know, again, Jeff, it's October, stop saying this. It could be a good time for the San Jose Sharks this year because on paper, and that's usually where we judge the San Jose Sharks, on paper, they do look to be the real deal.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we've seen teams make the postseason based on good starts before. I'm thinking back a couple of years to Colorado with Craig Anderson in net. Had a red-hot start, not so great for the second 2/3 of the season, but that start really got them in, and they managed to get the 8th seed in the end, and they had that great series with the Sharks. You mentioned Boston earlier on, just to flip back east. There's a report on NBC Sports I've seen this afternoon that they are quietly shopping Chara and Brad Marchand. Now... I speculated in my season previews whether they would consider moving Chara if the season didn't go well for them. I did not expect to read this after 2 games.
Well, here's the reality of it. I mean, I was told last year that what Boston would desperately like to do is move on from Zdeno Chara. I was told this last year on Christmas time. That they,
and understandably so.
Yeah, I mean, listen, he's lost a step. He's not the same, the monster, Shrek that we've seen for so many years. But I mean, he is still a very expensive hockey player. He's 38 years old. Injuries are now starting to catch up to him. It's an upper body this time. Last year, the John Tavares injury was a knee. So, you're not getting, Zdeno Chara, circa 2006. You're not getting that guy. You're getting a much different Zdeno Chara. If you trade for him. And that's an expensive ticket too. I mean, that would be a really challenging ticket to move. Brad Marchand situation, is an interesting one. Now he's out with a concussion. He has 2 more years, $4.5 million per. So the salary cap hit for someone like Brad Marchand, it really isn't that bad when you look at what this player can bring. But it seems as if, I hate using this term because it's such a buzz, but, culture's change seems to be the call of the day as they move on from that, that last era of Boston Bruins, that 2011 team that won the Stanley Cup, moving on from Milan Lucic. That really was an indication that they're going in a different direction, because in a lot of ways, even though it's Chara's team and he wears the C, don't you get the feeling, Rob, that Milan Lucic kind of typified everything that was Boston Bruins hockey? It was big, it was strong, it was in your face, it could score goals. It wasn't the prettiest out there, but it was effective.
Yeah,
that's
sure.
kind of what Milan Lucic was. And then the moment they moved on from him, it almost seemed as if, okay, now this is a team that is completely going in a different direction. And, I think it would be tough to move on from Chara just because of salary cap implications and who wants to take on a 38-year-old hockey player who's banged up. And now that, the injuries have really started with Chara, they're going to reoccur, and you're going to get a broken down monster, which is what Chara has always been.
Yeah.
You can't get the feeling now that this is the Boston Bruins finally starting to turn over a new leaf.
Yeah, you're almost looking for a team with a heap of cap space who need maybe to play Chara, even maybe as the fourth D-man, an experienced hand, just to reduce his minutes and use him as a guide for he's got 3 years left on his current deal, and he was noticeably less effective, shall we say, last year with the injuries, as you said, the foot speed was never great with Chara, but because he had those long strides, he kind of made up for it.
Yeah.
But it was noticeably different.
He did, and he was a versatile player. I mean, with the emergence of Torrey Krug on the blue line, who can fire the puck, all of a sudden you're much more comfortable as Claude Julien putting Chara in front of the net, where they've done it before, but they've never really had the guy that had the bomb on the point. I guess Johnny Boychuk to a certain extent, but he was a versatile player. When he pinned you, you weren't going anywhere. The wingspan was always great with Chara. And for a guy that size, he had amazing balance. And I'll tell you one thing, I've always made this point. I still maintain that the Lady Byng Trophy, which goes to the NHL's most gentlemanly player, should go to Zdeno Chara every year, not for what he does on the ice, but for what he chooses not to do. Because if he wanted to, Rob, at his height, at his weight, with his potential nastiness, he could lay waste to the NHL, and there wouldn't be enough chalk in the arena for all the outlines that would be all over the ice if Chara really decided to get angry and do something about it.
Yeah. Another team who've made not a great start. They got a point from an overtime loss to Tampa Bay. The Philadelphia Flyers had a players-only meeting, again, after 2 games. Supposed to be a clean slate under Dave Haxtell. A lot of issues maybe lingering from last season, do we think?
It's still not a really good team, right? The blue line's still an issue, maybe the worst in the NHL.
I feel like they're a team that could do. I feel like they're a team that could do well if everything went in their favor. So Mason held up, Giroux found his form again. Guys like Del Zotto and Streit hit their A game on a regular basis. I feel like they could compete and maybe steal a wild card spot. But there's holes in there, and I feel sad for Sam Gagner. I like Sam Gagner, but he's now a guy who's a $3 million healthy scratch.
2 games in a row.
Yeah.
And it looks like he'll play tonight against the Florida Panthers. And man, did they ever get whooped by the Cats over the weekend?
Oh yeah.
That was downright embarrassing. Yeah, the Gagne thing has me scratching my head too. I kind of chalk it up to a rookie head coach making a very rookie mistake. I mean, here's Sam Gagner, who in a defense-first system, in a very defensively oriented Arizona Coyotes team last year, still got 40 points. And when he's put on first unit power play, the guy delivers. 400-plus games in the NHL, can score. I mean, I still don't know why you go out and acquire Sam Gagner if you're not going to play him. Ron Hextall has always said all of the right things, the positive things about Sam Gagner, but end of it, it's Dave Haxtall's decision. And he's a rookie coach who didn't spend any time in the American Hockey League. I mean, he goes right from Division I right into the NHL. And, you can look at rookie growing pains, and we're starting to see them, immediately with the Philadelphia Flyers. Probably a more veteran coach would have made sure that Sam Gagner somehow was on the opening night roster in that game against Tampa for the Philadelphia Flyers. But, I chalk this one up to just, a rookie head coach going through rookie growing pains, making some rookie mistakes. I will say one thing. The most exciting hockey that we've seen so far this season, Rob, is that 3-on-3 with Tampa and Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Wasn't that glorious? Like, and okay, so you're Jason Garrison, all right, defenseman for the Tampa Bay Lightning. When have you ever had a breakaway from your own blue line? Has that ever happened in Jason Garrison's entire career?
I would say that doesn't happen to a lot of guys, even forwards. There are some forwards who will never get that opportunity.
I know. It's from your own clear. Like, it was a beautiful kick pass. Like, very quietly, the great play on that, Valtteri Filppula is pinned up against the boards. He steps on the puck and kicks it over to Jason Garrison, and very quietly, one of the most brilliant plays we've seen all season in the NHL. I know it's early. And then Jason Garrison grabs the puck, just over his blue line, looks up, and it's an open field. And he's got nothing but the net mind. I'm thinking to myself, this is going to be the most bizarre feeling for Jason Garrison. I mean, his MO is hammer the puck from the point. He's a slap shot guy. And here he is looking up ice, and he sees nothing but the netminder. I don't know. You wonder, because you have a lot of time to think about what your move is going to be.
Too much time.
I wonder how much Jason Garrison said, I'm going to do this. No, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to do that. No, I'm not going to do that. Like, I was almost waiting for him to overthink the play, because Jason Garrison never gets, let alone a breakaway from his own blue line, he never gets a breakaway in general. It was the most remarkable, and the saves that Mason made, the two on Strawman, the one on Tyler Johnson was probably the save of the year so far, and then the Kucherov save as well, all in overtime. He's going east to west, all 10-bell saves. That to me that's the best hockey we've seen all season.
Yeah.
So even though Philadelphia, as you point out, already having players-only meetings and looks already like the wheels have fallen off the wagon, they have delivered with the best hockey we've seen so far this season.
For sure. And I know it's something you and Greg touched on the Marek versus Wyshynski podcast. Some teams have amazing 3-on-3 lineups. So
it's true, and it's fun. And and generally it's the guys. Generally, it's the guys that just want to go and play river hockey, that don't want to be married to a system. That's the one they keep going back to. Everyone's like, well, we're waiting for the coaches to get their hooks in this thing and really ruin 3-on-3 and dumb it down and defense it down. But if you have enough guys that just want to play river hockey on your team, just go and let them. Go and let them play. Like, they can't be coached.
No.
That's the glorious thing about 3-on-3. If you want to be successful, it seems, don't coach it. Just put your three best players at that time with wheels out there, and make sure nobody makes any drop passes. Because drop passes 3-on-3 is going to equal a 2-on-1 the other way, and then the party's over. So so far it's fun. Philadelphia and Tampa was a lot of fun. Even Ottawa and Toronto, after some growing pains early in that 3-on-3, ended up being a pretty fun encounter. But listen, so far so good for the 3-on-3. I'm sure. Although, you know what? We're cynical hockey fans. We'll be bored of it by Christmas watch.
But it depends. I mean, the Blackhawks threw Patrick Kane out there against the Islanders, and that worked out okay for them. So
not bad. Not bad. He's got some hands, right, Ruff?
For sure. The other big change this season, the coaches' challenge. Not many people really knew how it worked. Mike Babcock threw it out on the first night. We've seen it a couple more times since then. Thoughts so far?
So far so good. So far it's worked generally. The Babcock one was kind of easy with the goalie interference, because that was a stick to the head of the goaltender. That was a cut and dry issue. Yeah. The problem with the goalie interference, and I mean, the offside is the offside, and on further review you can always get that right.
Yep.
But goalie interference, to me, Rob, in a lot of ways, is still a judgment call. I mean, how many times have you been sitting around with your mates and you see a goal go in, but the goalie got bumped, and you see it one way and your mate saw it another way, and that guy saw it a completely different way, but it's the exact same play.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, there are goaltenders, and Carey Price comes to mind, who are really good at making a situation look like goalie interference. Just come out top of the crease, enough lean into a player to make it look like you're interfered with. At the end of it, whether you're going to your iPad to have a look at it again, or you're calling it in real time, it still comes down to an interpretation. What did you think happened? I know we think with video review, it's always going to be, we get it right and it's a black and white issue. But when it comes to something like goaltender interference, I'm not sure where you're at on this one, Rob, but to me, it still comes down to, this is how I feel the play went, as opposed to, this is the way I know the play went.
I think it spoke volumes that the general managers couldn't agree on what was and wasn't goaltender interference at their meeting. Because that's normally where you find these rules are thrashed out, agreed upon. Everybody knows what hymn sheet they're singing from, and they couldn't agree.
Yep.
And as you said, it's almost a personal call. I know if I go to the other writers at In Goal magazine, I will get a different answer to a group of forwards who used to play. If I go to Nick
100%.
Kyprios, he'd say something different to Jamie McLennan and things like that. They
Well,
would.
yeah,
And
Nick would say if it's Grant Fuhr, it's fair game. There's no such thing as goal interference. It's fine. Everything's good.
Yeah, and that's where the different perspectives start to build up as well. So,
yeah,
like
we expect it to be perfect, and even though we have this idea in our minds that there's video review now, and all the calls we made correctly, it's still at the end of it. It's still up to interpretation.
Yeah. One last thing, Jeff, because I know you got a punt shortly. We talked about Claude Julien, the Bruins not doing so well. Dave Hackstall's team are having players-only meeting already. Kind of a bit early to call time on him. But every season there seem to be guys who go into the year on the hot seat. Mike Yao seems to be on the hot seat every year. I feel kind of sorry for the guy now. Is there anybody in your view who is under threat of losing their job this year?
I think that, I think Ken Hitchcock at the end of last year with St. Louis thought that he was, dead man walking, that he wasn't going to return as a head coach.
100% agree, yeah.
So, it wouldn't surprise me if, once again, he still has that sort of gun pointed at him. So I would say St. Louis. Todd Richards might be another one in Columbus. Expectations are high. Last year they wrote off because of man games lost, and that's legitimate, specifically with the goaltender. But if there isn't, signs of marked improvement in Columbus this year with a full and healthy squad, it might not be a really good time for Todd Richards. Those would be the two that I would circle, sort of right out of the gate. There's always surprises along the way, things we didn't expect to see. Well, put it this way. Would you be surprised if Daryl Sutter just got so frustrated at this Los Angeles Kings team that he walked away? I don't think that's in Sutter's MO to walk away, but it wouldn't be the most shocking thing to happen to Los Angeles
if they carried on like this.
If they continue to sputter and just say, you know what, we're just going to hand the whole thing to Mike Stevens. Or if you're the Boston Bruins and you continue to sputter, would it shock you if Claude Julien ends up walking the plank this year? Because
I think he was lucky to survive in the summer.
There was a lot of talk about it, and it may be a political strategy. Who knows? But when they let Peter Chiarelli go, there was a lot of talk that they would also let Claude Julien go. But then the thinking was, well, I lost you.
We did. It wouldn't be a podcast with Jeff Marek without technical difficulties.
That's fantastic. That's outstanding. Where were we?
Claude Julien on the hot seat.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if Claude Julien ends up being one of those guys on the hot seat as well, unless Boston can turn it around drastically. Which, when you look at the lineup and how uninspired the play is, couple that with some injuries on the back end, and no Dougie Hamilton there anymore. He was traded for prospects and draft picks. It wouldn't surprise anyone if Claude Julien becomes one of those players that one of those coaches that everyone circles and says, well, someone has to pay for this. You can't fire 23 guys. You might as well fire the coach. Some talk he was going to be fired last year, but the Boston Bruins left one more firing bullet in their chamber, knowing that they're going to still have one more chance to blame someone else before kicking the blame upstairs.
Yeah. You mentioned Ken Hitchcock there a moment ago. Is he and potentially Michel Therrien, depending on how the Habs do, are they these classic guys who've laid the table for someone else to dine out on? Therrien did it before with the Penguins.
Yep.
We've seen it countless times. For me, Michel Therrien is kind of a death or glory thing. He might win the Jack Adams, in my opinion. He was my nomination because you've got the combination of elite goalie, good but not great roster. So if he makes them do good things, great things, he's a Jack Adams candidate. But equally, he sometimes rubs guys up the wrong way, and like you just said with Claude Julien, you can't fire the 23 guys on the ice. So if the Habs wobble and the power play continues, tripping over words, to stumble, he's the easy target there.
Tyrion's interesting, and you're banging on about Carey Price. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the work of Stephen Birch. He's an analytics guru, does some work with us at Sportsnet, and he put together over the weekend, just sent it off to me. I'm sure he's going to publish it somewhere. A list of what exactly it is, how much Carey Price means to his team, and how other goaltenders would perform in the exact same scenario. It's spectacular how much Carey Price is to this squad. Outside of grabbing a player stick and joining the rush, this guy pretty much does everything for the Montreal Canadiens. So you're right, But then again, the old saying in the NHL has always been this with coaches, and it continues to be true. show me a good coach, and I'll show you a good goalie. Because seldom do you ever find that someone wins the Jack Adams without having an all-star goaltender between the pipes.
Funnily enough, I used that very phrase when talking to one of my friends today.
It's true. And listen, it's not mine. I didn't come up with it. But, there's always been an association that you can't draw with the performance of the goaltender and the performance of the coach.
Yeah, for sure.
And hint, it's more about the goalie than the coach, I assure you.
Well, I know you've got to get away, Jeff. Thank you very much again for rejoining me on the One Puck Shot podcast. Hopefully we can catch up again a little bit later in the season if we can get the schedules lined up.
Let's do it. Yeah, anytime, Rob. Always a pleasure catching up with you, pal.
Thanks very much, Jeff. Enjoy your day.
Thanks, bud.
One.
Puck Short. There we go. Thanks again to Jeff Marek for joining me on this week's One Puck Shot podcast. You can follow him on Twitter at Jeff Marek, and of course you can catch up with him pretty much daily on the Marek vs. Wyshynski podcast. Obviously, schedules allowing for Greg and Jeff. Always great to have his views on the world of hockey, especially at the early part of the season. And there's a lot of question marks. It's easy to get too high or too low on teams for their early form. But always nice to catch up with Jeff. If you want to get in touch with One Puck Short, you can follow me on Twitter at RobMcGregor35. You can also email onepuckshort at gmail.com, dead easy. Let us know what you think of the show. If you've got any questions or any comments on the NHL, the British game, the international game, whatever you want to get off your chest, get in touch. You can also find the blog, onepuckshort.wordpress.com. There's a couple of articles gone up there in the last few days. One about the Flames goaltending that I touched on at the top of the show. And also one about the New York Islanders' really terrible inability to develop their own goaltenders. Since taking Rick DiPietro first overall in 2000, they've drafted 14 other goalies. And the only one who's come close to being a regular NHL netminder is Kevin Poulin, who's played less than 50 games. Read about that on the blog. As I said, you can also find us and like us on Facebook, facebook.com/onepuckshort. And if you are an iTunes subscriber, if you could consider leaving a review, that would be great, because reviews help us bump up the charts, the news and noteworthy of the sports, all that sort of stuff. So any reviews are greatly appreciated. That's it for this week's show. Thanks very much again for joining me. I'll speak to you all again very soon.